The exact method. A Roman mason used to mix indestructible mortar. The sea is never gentle with stone. Salt bites, waves hammer, wind drives spray into every pore. In most ages, that is the end of the story. A wall swells, cracks, and turns to sand. But along the coast of southern Italy, there are places where the sea has been chewing for centuries and still cannot win. Piers that should have softened into ruin remain sharp. Harbor blocks still locked together like teeth. Breakwaters still take the odor of winter storms as if they were poured yesterday. How? Tonight, we step into the smoke and heat of an ancient worksite to watch a Roman mason prepare a mortar that does not simply resist time, it learns from it. And by the end, the method will feel less like a recipe and more like a living bargain between fire, stone, and water. We begin before sunrise, in Campania, near the Bay of Naples. The air carries the tang of brine, the breath of sulfur from the volcanic fields, and the low murmur of a port waking up. Somewhere beyond the docks, Mount Vitruvius sits like a closed fist. On the edge of the site stands a man with lime dust embedded in the creases of his hands. Not a senator, not a general, a builder. He is a caementarius, a concrete man, a mason of rubble and mortar, the kind of craftsman who does not carve marble statues, but makes the ground itself obey new shapes. His name, for our story, is Marcus, and Marcus is about to mix what later ages will call indestructible. Not because it never breaks, but because it never truly stays broken. The medieval world will eventually inherit fragments of Roman cities. Collapsed vaults, broken baths, shattered harbors. And they will do something revealing. They will pry at the joints, trying to steal the stone, and find themselves cursing the mortar. It clings like it has teeth. It refuses to let go. So what did Marcus know that later builders forgot? To answer that, we have to follow the material backward. Past the wall, past the wet mixture, past even the ash. Back to the moment stone becomes fire's victim. Because Roman mortar begins with a transformation that is violent, deliberate, and dangerously hot. A limestone boulder looks harmless, pale, heavy, ordinary. Marcus does not treat it as ordinary. He treats it as a locked container. Inside that stone is a future glue, a future binder, a future skin that can knit rubble into a single mass. But it only comes out if the stone is burned hard enough to change its nature. So Marcus and his crew feed limestone into a kiln, an oven of stone and clay that is nothing like a modern furnace, but can still reach the brutal heat required. They stack fuel, set fire, and let the kiln roar. The site becomes a place of constant tending, adding fuel, watching draft, reading flame color, listening to the kiln's breath. Hours pass, then more. At last, the limestone emerges no longer as limestone. It emerges as quicklime. Chalky, brittle, hungry. Hungry is not a metaphor. Quicklime wants water with a ferocity that can burn skin. It will drink moisture from the air if allowed. It will heat itself as it reacts. It will turn a careless moment into a scar. Marcus knows this, and he handles it with the wary respect of a man holding a sleeping spark. Now comes the first secret. Most people, even many skilled builders, imagine lime mortar as something calm. Add water, make paste, spread between stones. But Roman work was not always calm. Sometimes the mortar was made with a deliberate violence, an intentional heat inside the mix itself. Marcus needs more than lime. He needs the other half of the bargain, the powder that makes the mortar hydraulic, able to set even where air cannot reach. Inside a thick wall, beneath a wet foundation, even under the sea. So he sends laborers to the place where the ground is strange. Near the town the Romans call Puteoli, the earth offers a dust that looks like dull sand but behaves like magic. It is volcanic ash, pozzolana, born from eruptions, shattered into fine particles, rich with reactive minerals. This is where Roman engineering becomes regional genius. Not every province has this ash. Not every coastline has a volcano that gifts the right chemistry. Campania does. Marcus does not need to understand the invisible details inside the powder. He only needs to know what his craft teaches him. When this ash meets lime, the mixture grows strong in places ordinary mortar would fail. It hardens in dampness. It hardens in thickness. It hardens under water. That is the second secret. Roman mortar is not only lime and sand. It is lime and volcanic earth in a partnership that changes how stone can be used. The ash arrives in sacks and baskets. Marcus inspects it the way a baker inspects flour. He rubs it between fingers. He watches how it clings. He knows that fine powder means more contact, more reaction, more strength. Now look around the site. There is no single pile of concrete. There are many piles, each one a choice. A mound of broken tuff and volcanic rock, light in weight but strong in compression. A heap of rubble, fractured stone, chipped brick, shards of old tile, buckets of water hauled in skins and jars. And there, under cover, the pale chunks of quicklime. A modern mind might ask for exact proportions, for rigid measures. Marcus does not carry a measuring cup. He carries judgment, learned by failure and paid for in calluses. But the principle is consistent. Lime for binding, pozzolana for hydraulic strength, and aggregate for body. Rubble that turns paste into stone. He chooses a mixing bed, a wooden trough, wide enough for men to work around. Tools are simple, wooden shovels, heavy hose, perhaps a mattock for stubborn clumps. The sound is earthy. Scrape, thud, grind. The first stage looks almost boring. Dry materials go in. Pozzolana first, like dark flour. Aggregate next, like rough gravel. Then the lime. And here is where the method becomes startling. Marcus does not always arrive with lime already slaked into a smooth putty. Sometimes he brings quicklime in fragments, dry, reactive, dangerous, and mixes it directly with the ash and rubble before adding water. It seems reckless. It is not. It is controlled risk. Because when water finally hits this dry blend, something happens that every man near the trough can feel in his bones. The mix heats. Not slowly, not politely. It hisses and steams. Heat blooms through the mortar as the quicklime slakes in place, swelling, cracking, transforming into hydrated lime while surrounded by ash and stone. This is hot mixing, a technique that turns the mortar itself into a brief furnace. Marcus does not flinch. He expects it. The crew works quickly, folding the mixture, chopping lumps, forcing water through the mass so the reaction happens everywhere it must. And they do not chase every white fragment until it disappears. That is the third secret. Those pale bits, lime clasts, lime fragments, are not always a mistake. They can be a feature, a reservoir, a hidden supply of reactive material locked inside the hardened mortar. Later, when a crack forms, maybe from settling, maybe from an earthquake tremor, maybe from the slow push and pull of tides, water can reach those fragments. The lime can dissolve, migrate, and reform as new mineral growth that fills the crack. A wall that heals itself does not need to be perfect on day one. It needs to be capable of repair. Marcus is not thinking in those scientific terms. He is thinking like a builder who has seen what lasts. He has watched ordinary lime mortar soften when the rain never stops. He has watched poor mixes crumble at the joints. He has learned that the stubborn, lumpy mortar, made hot, made fast, made with volcanic powder, survives. Now the trough holds something different from ordinary paste. It is heavier, stickier, alive with warmth. The men lift it in baskets. They carry it to the work. And this is where the craft becomes a choreography, because mortar is not simply mixed. It is placed, packed, and persuaded into its final shape before it begins to lock. If Marcus is building a wall core, he uses the mortar like a binder for rubble. Stone and brick fragments go into the formwork. Mortar follows. The crew rams and compacts, eliminating voids, forcing the paste into every gap. The wall becomes a layered cake of rock and binder, pressed into unity. If Marcus is building near water, the challenge is harsher. Water tries to wash away fresh mortar before it can grip. So Roman marine work uses mass and method. They build wooden frames, create compartments, then drop in rubble and mortar in a controlled sequence. In some cases, they even work with seawater as part of the environment the concrete must accept. Here comes the fourth secret, and it feels like betrayal of instinct. Seawater is not only an enemy, In certain Roman marine concretes, it becomes a collaborator over time. As seawater percolates through the hardened material, it triggers slow chemical processes. The volcanic components do not remain inert. Minerals can continue to form. Crystalline growth that reinforces the matrix rather than undermining it. That is why some Roman harbor concretes do not merely endure. They strengthen. Imagine that for a moment. A breakwater that becomes more stone-like as the sea works through it. Not because it resists chemistry, but because it uses chemistry. Marcus cannot see crystals threading through the mortar years later, but he can see outcomes. He can see which piers hold and which fail. The port is his laboratory. Now pause. Because if this method is so effective, why did anyone ever forget it? This is where history introduces a twist. Ancient writers described Roman building practices, but words can simplify what hands actually do. Text can preserve an ideal method, while work sites preserve a practical one. And sometimes, the ground itself preserves the truth. In Pompeii, frozen in a moment by volcanic catastrophe. Archaeologists and materials scientists have found evidence that speaks like a time capsule. Piles of dry ingredients, partially prepared mixes, traces of quicklime fragments present before water was added. That supports the idea that hot mixing was not a modern fantasy projected onto the past, but a real technique used at Roman sites. So the exact method is not a single neat recipe written on a tablet. It is a chain of choices Marcus makes with confidence. He chooses volcanic powder where it is available. He chooses lime burned hard and kept dry. He chooses to mix dry first, then add water, letting heat do part of the work. He chooses to leave some reactive fragments in the mass. He chooses compaction and thickness, making the concrete dense and stubborn. And above all, he chooses a mortar that does not depend on air to harden, because he is building in a world where dampness and water are constant enemies. If you are enjoying this kind of step-by-step reconstruction, craft, sweat, and ancient problem-solving, subscribe to the channel. It helps more people find these stories, and it keeps this work alive. Now, let us walk closer to Marcus as the day advances, because the process does not end at mixing. Mortar has a life cycle. Fresh, it is pliable. It can be pushed, molded, forced into joints. Then it enters the critical phase, the set. In ordinary lime mortar, much of the final hardening depends on carbonation. Lime slowly reacting with carbon dioxide and air to become limestone again. That is slow, and it struggles deep inside thick masonry. But in pozzolanic mortar, another pathway opens. Reactions between lime and the volcanic components can form binding phases that develop strength even in damp or low air conditions. Marcus benefits from this without naming it. He simply knows the mortar takes even where other mortars stay weak. This matters when building vaults, baths, cisterns, harbors, structures where moisture never truly leaves. A bathhouse wall sweats with heat and steam. A cistern is always humid. A harbor pier is licked by waves twice a day. Marcus is building for those realities, not for a dry countryside cottage. So he watches the placed mortar closely. He checks that rubble is coated. He ensures the wall core is compact. He orders repairs while the mix is still workable, because once it locks, it becomes stone. The men clean tools with sand and water. They scrape troughs. They cover piles. They protect quicklime from accidental moisture, because the wrong kind of wetness at the wrong time ruins control. By late afternoon, the site smells of damp ash and warm lime. The mortar in the wall has begun its quiet transformation. And now comes the moment where the Roman method stops feeling like mere craft and starts feeling like a philosophy. Marcus is not trying to build something that never cracks. He is trying to build something that survives cracking. That difference is everything. Stone moves, soil settles, temperature changes. Water freezes in tiny pores, then expands. Earthquakes roll through Italy like distant thunder. Cracks are inevitable. The Roman trick is to treat cracks as part of the structure's future, not an unforeseen disaster. A lime fragment that seems like sloppiness becomes, in that future, a source of healing material. A volcanic ash particle that seems like dirt becomes, in that future, a site of slow mineral growth. A seawater seep that seems like damage becomes, in that future, a chemical exchange that can strengthen the matrix. In other words, the mortar is designed not as a dead thing, but as a reactive one. Now imagine the medieval builder, centuries later, prying at Roman ruins. He expects to lift stone with a wedge. Instead, he finds that mortar has fused rubble into a single mass. He finds that joints are not weak seams, but hardened continuities. He curses it, but he also learns from it. Brick dust begins to appear in later mortars where volcanic ash is not available. Crushed ceramics become substitutes, imitating pozzolanic behavior when nature does not provide the perfect powder. In that way, Roman mortar leaves a shadow across time, not always copied exactly, but respected, studied, and sometimes unknowingly echoed. And here, at the end of Marcus's workday, we return to the question we began with. What makes it indestructible? Not a spell, not a mystery, a sequence. Stone burned into quicklime, volcanic ash chosen for its reactive gift, dry mixing that sets the stage for heat, water added at the moment of placement, turning the trough into a brief cauldron, lime fragments preserved as hidden reserves, rubble packed and compressed until paste becomes rock, and, in marine works, a willingness to let the sea participate over centuries, growing minerals where modern materials would decay. This is why Roman mortar feels like a blueprint from another mindset. It is not only about strength at the moment of completion. It is about endurance across generations. If you want more reconstructions like this, where we take a single object or material and rebuild the whole world around it, subscribe. We will keep walking into smoke, fire, and mud until the old methods speak clearly again. Because the most haunting part of this story is not that the Romans could do this. It is that they did it routinely. They poured harbors and domes and foundations with an understanding that mixed empirical craft with regional geology. Their greatest structures were not only feats of design, but feats of materials intelligence. And today, when we stand near an ancient pier and feel the sea wind on our face, we are not only looking at stone. We are looking at a decision Marcus made at a trough, to trust ash, to trust heat, and to build a mortar that stays active long after the hands that mixed it are gone. A mortar that, when it cracks, does not surrender. It responds, it fills, it continues. And that is the closest thing to indestructible that a builder has ever truly made.